Hello, my viewers. Welcome to the Follow the Reader program. We are still reading our book, Blossoms of the Savannah. We are in chapter 2. Remember to subscribe, follow the reader. Let's read together. Taio and Resian were woken up by a lively chatter of birds in the trees surrounding the house and by the intermittent crowing of roosters. What a contrast to what they were used to in Nakuru. They were always woken up by a rowdy clatter that assailed their ears at dawn, what with matatu drivers hooting and revving their engines noisily, touts shouting themselves hoarse while incessantly banging the bodyworks of their vehicles. For the first time in their lives, they experienced a rare atmosphere of tranquility and serenity that they had never known to exist. Taio Leslie got out of bed and sleepily dragged herself to the window. When she opened the shutter, bright morning sunlight suddenly flooded the room. A cool, fresh breeze swept in and caressed her face soothingly. From a distance, she could hear a bustle of activity within the homestead. She could also hear the mooing of cattle and bleating of sheep not far from the homestead. But what captivated her most was the cool natural environment that was created by the giant trees that grew between the houses. Wondering what could have entranced her sister so much that she kept gazing obliquely at a spot outside the house, Resian too stealthily left her bed and joined Taio at the window. Standing behind her sister, Resian noticed features at their uncle's homestead that she had not seen the previous night when they arrived. Apart from that house in which they had spent the night, 3 main houses stood within a well-tended and evenly trimmed apple perimeter hedge. She guessed that the 4 houses belonged to their 4 aunts, who they were informed the previous night were the wives of their uncle. Between the houses stood smaller buildings that were overshadowed by massive yellow-trunked acacia trees. Interspersed were olive green oleriennital trees whose fragrant foliage filled the air with their aromatic scent. Flight of birds flashed between the trees, and the air was alive with their constant motion and cheerful calls. "Hope our home will look like this," said Resian with enthusiasm. "It's so calm and peaceful here. It's the kind of home one would look forward to come back at the end of college semester." "Children," a woman's voice called from an adjacent room, "come out and have your tea." They quickly dressed up, and within no time they were out of the house, and one of their aunts was leading them to the next house to join the rest of the family for morning tea. The 3 crossed the courtyard talking happily, the girls walking closely behind their aunt. Like the house they had slept in, the next 2 houses they walked past were built of heavy cinder slabs, had similar wooden shutters for windows, and were roofed with green-painted corrugated iron sheets. Standing beside each house, on raised platform made of strong cinder beams, were large black plastic water tanks that collected rainwater from the roofs. Chickens clucked and scratched in the cool shade underneath. Clusters of bushes of olobai with their shiny dark green leaves and tiny yellow flowers scattered the compound. Ilikilenya climbers grew around the beams that supported the water tanks and climbed over the walls of the houses, making them look cool and comfortable. The last house on the row was next to the main gate through which they had entered the homestead the previous night. It was different from the previous 3. It was larger and was built of stone and had glass windows, and like the others, its corrugated iron sheets roof was painted green. The front door was ajar, and standing smilingly next to it was a stout woman of 45 or so who greeted the girls affectionately. She eyed them curiously as they responded to the greetings. She introduced herself as Yeyo Botor, which meant she was the senior-most aunt and the eldest wife of their uncle. They were led to a spacious living room whose large open glass window faced the east, allowing in bright morning sunlight. The light shone on the young faces whose wide eyes stared unashamedly at the two young women who Yeyobotor was introducing as their sisters. The 16 or so children aged between 3 and 16 were perched on benches, stools, chairs around the room, each holding a steaming enamel tea mug on one hand and a slice of bread on the other. Their mothers were there too, and so was Mama Milanoi, who sat placidly admiring the composure of her own two daughters. It was only after the children were reassured that their new sisters were not visitors and that they would be seeing them often that calm returned and they resumed taking their tea and bread. Room was created at the table, and Tayo and Resian sat with their cousins. Seeing that they had the whole morning to themselves after breakfast, Tayo and Resian told their mothers they wanted to take a walk around the neighborhood. She allowed them but cautioned care and wariness of strangers who might take advantage of their unfamiliarity. The girls looked at each other and giggled. They dismissed their mother's misplaced fears as born of misconception by the old generation that girls were weaklings incapable of deciding what was right. Their mother watched them as they walked leisurely down the path out of their uncle's homestead. For reasons she did not understand, a pang of strange premonition twisted her nerves unpleasantly. A creepy feeling kept on gnawing at her conscience regarding her daughter's status of being in Toyen Mengalana in the midst of a community that cherished girl-child circumcision. She, however, dismissed the feeling and regretted it to the back of her mind. "What do you make of your Uncle Simiren's home?" Resian asked her sister quietly as they walked down their path. "Honestly, I don't think all is well." Beneath that veneer of apparent happiness, I detected some apprehension, a subtle rivalry of some sort between the four houses. "What a terrible person you are, my dear sister," Tayo rebuked her sister mildly. "You are not worth being a guest in anyone's home. How dare you make such judgment?" Their lives seemed to suit them perfectly. "Easy, easy, big sister," said Resian teasingly. "Don't be so harsh on me. All I have done is to make an observation. Am I not entitled to that?" "Of course," Tayo agreed and flicked an affectionate smile at her sister. "But do you know that the rivalry you detected could simply be a figment of your own fertile imagination?" "That could be true," Resian added and smiled pleasantly. But can you honestly claim, if you're one of the 16 little fellas taking teas from enamel mugs in that crowded room this morning, to be content?" "Perhaps I would be happy," she answered dutifully. "You know, happiness is relative. One could be happy in a family of 20, and another may fail to find happiness in a family where he or she is an only child." "Did you notice that 2 of our aunts are expectant?" Resian asked mischievously, slanting a look at her sister. "At that rate." "Come of it," Tayo said sternly. "There are better things to discuss. Parents have the right to have as many children as they desire. You'll have that right yourself when your turn comes." "Who? Not me," Resian said vehemently. "I don't want to be a parent, at least not in the foreseeable future. I want to study. When I have obtained my degree, other peripheral matters such as husband, children, and such may be considered." They were walking back to the homestead talking animatedly when they were accosted by a tall, heavy-set young man with a thick dark beard and moustache. He wore a pair of faded jeans and a dirty blue shirt. On his face was a wide, impudent grin. Tayo glanced at the young man and looked away. She moved closer to Resian and nudged her to change direction, but the man walked directly to Tayo. On seeing the man approaching, a heavy knobberry on his hand, Resian almost fainted. "Please do not harm us," she pleaded. "We do not have any money with us." "Who told you I want any money?" The man jeered as he strode menacingly towards them. "Are you not the Intoye Megalana from Nakuru town?" he asked, laughing contemptuously. "I want to have a good look at you and know what kind of stuff you are made of." He roughly grabbed Tayo's arm. Leave me alone. Leave my sister alone, Resian hissed indignantly, lifting her eyes and glaring into his. Let go her arm at once. Let go of my hand, Tayo demanded, trembling with anger. We are not the kind of women you have in mind. What women? The man retorted acidly. Soon, you'll be able to differentiate decent women from Intoye Nemangalana. Tayo tried to wrestle her arm from the man's grip without success, but suddenly, he seemed to change his mind. With a sour smile, he spat and glared at the girls. Then, releasing Tayo's hand, he told them, You have not seen the last of me. Soon you will come to know that there is no place in our society for women of your ilk. He turned and disappeared down the road as suddenly as he had appeared. The two girls sighed heavily and shook their heads as they watched him walk away. Although they had put up brave faces, they were terribly shaken. Thank God his intention was not to rape us, Resian said, tears streaming down her face. We would have been helpless in the hands of such a brute. Tayo bit her lower lip, struggling to maintain control. His intention could have been worse than rape, she said, tears of anger and indignation welling up in her eyes. They quickened their steps to their uncle's home. True, the incident had taken the sparkle part from the day that had begun so joyfully, but they reasoned that it could have been worse. The girls debated as to whether to inform their parents of the ordeal. They knew their mother would understand and empathize with them, but judging from the past experience, their father would be less supportive. He would blame them for having dared venture into an unknown territory without his approval. Finally, they decided to keep the incidents to themselves. When he finished supervising the offloading of the lorries and arranging of furniture and other personal effects in their new home, Olekaelo set out to meet his mentor Soin Olesupeo. He was a much older man, possibly 65, a member of Ilimolerian clan and respected elder of Ilinyangusi age set. He was known to be shrewd, scrupulous, and honest, attributes that saw him rise from an ordinary Olonkuchai who drove his 3 or 4 head of cattle for hundreds of kilometers to the cattle market at Dagoretti to now immensely rich man that he was. He was reputed to own the largest ranch in Nasila, and his beef herd and sheep were said to be tens of thousands. His business empire comprised a fleet of buses, lorries, and shops beside numerous business premises and residential houses that he rented out. As he drove his pickup towards Olesupeyo's farm, Olekaelo gave thoughts to the old man. When he was in primary school, Olesupeyo was already a famous cattle trader. He would buy cattle from Nasila and ride them all the way to the Dagoretti market, where he would sell them and come back laden. In those days, money was still a new concept to many upcoming illiterate traders. He would find it difficult to add up the notes and was forced to arrive at an aggregate of what he actually owned. Olesupeyo had to fetch Olekaelo, and together they would walk down deep into the forest where they would find a safe place. He would then remove one of the blankets that he wore and spread it on the grass, take out his pouch, and from it fish out a large bundle of notes and coins. He would ask his friend to count the money while he stood tense waiting, and would only relax when Olekaelo told him the actual amount and it tallied with the figure he had in mind. They carried out that exercise at least twice a month as he came to trust and depend on Olekaelo. The two became close, and their friendship developed even as Olesupeyo became a very wealthy businessman and farmer. Olekaelo respected him and considered him his mentor. Although Olesupeyo did not attend school, Olekaelo thought he was one of those intelligent old men who were able to embrace modern culture, balance it appropriately, and make it run parallel to the old Nasila culture. He had 6 wives and about 30 children. He had sent all his sons to school, and 2 of them had reached university level. All his daughters were circumcised and married off to prominent elders in Nasila. Olekaelo had witnessed Olesupeyo incense only on one occasion. A certain woman known as Minik Nkoitoi, the Emakererei, a manager at a certain sheep ranch, called Interenaju, and a known crusader against girl circumcision had come to persuade him not to circumcise his daughters. But Olosupeo would hear none of it. When the crusader insisted on having her way, he got angry and forcibly ejected her out of his homestead, threatening to clobber her. Later, he told Olekaelo the woman whom he referred to as a wasp was a great threat to the Ma culture. Female circumcision, he said, was not only an honored rite of passage that had been in existence from time immemorial, but an important practice that tamed an otherwise worldly gender. Like cattle that require to be dehorned to reduce accidental injuries to each other, a certain measure of docility was also necessary to keep more than one wife in one homestead. And Olekaelo agreed with him, recalling the adage that 2 women in one homestead were 2 potent pots of poison. Olesupeo's homestead, sheep, pens, and cattle enclosure were at the center of an expansive farm that extended for many kilometers in all directions. Olekaelo first glimpsed at the glimmer of the corrugated iron sheet rooftops from the top of a low hill some 10 kilometers away. The manyatas that long ago used to dot the area amongst scrubby trees and bush had given way to modern, sprawling buildings. The trees had been cut down and the bush cleared so that in one direction the land was now an expansive plain of thick, rich grass that stretched as far as the eyes could see, while towards the other direction thousands of acres of wheat and barley lay. Olekaelo arrived at the homestead and parked his pickup outside the gate. Looking at the modern homestead, he appreciated how far his friend had traveled, from being a simple cattle trader to the wealthy man who owned that massive homestead accommodating 8 large houses. The first wife house was the largest and was built among tall Iloiranga trees. He walked towards the gate thinking of the man he continually drew his inspiration from. He had therefore considered it opportune to make his home the first port of call before he put his hand to the plough. Olesupeo came out of the house to welcome his friend. He had only just woken from his siesta and his eyes were still smarting from sleep. As he walked down the steps in front of the house, he lifted a corner of his shirt and scratched his belly while his other hand stroked the stubble of his chin. "Come in, my brother," Supeo said happily. "Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come right inside." They shook hands warmly, and Olekaelo was led into the spacious living room. As they talked casually over a cup of tea, Supeo glanced furtively at his friend, his black eyes gleaming in the afternoon sunshine. He certainly liked him. He told himself quietly, and he would have liked him to succeed in the business he had set himself to do. He, however, considered Olekaelo a beau, sometimes a pompous one, although he did not doubt his intelligence. Little did he know that his friend was much more advanced when it came to the murky business of the underworld. "I hope all is well with your business arrangement," Supeo commented nonchalantly. "Everything is moving on smoothly," said Olekaelo contentedly. "I hope to open the doors of the shop at the onset of the rains." "Good," said Supeo cheerfully. "You will soon find out that unlike in Agribics, where somebody else provides the finances, another does the books, yet another runs up and down making sales, you'll have to carry all those tasks single-handedly. And sales will be the most challenging." Olekaelo's pride was wounded. How could the old fella think he was so naive as not to know how to organize his sales? Perhaps he thought sorely. His clansmen had not known that in his earlier years in Agribics, he had been sent out to open sales depots in remote places, which he quickly developed into expanding, profitable, modern branches. Maybe it was time he showed the aging businessman that younger bulls were rearing to go and the older ones would better start skirting the pastures. He threw caution to the wind. "The sales were already taken care of," Olekaelo said pompously. "Sales of about 300,000 bags of fertilizer, 500,000 bags of seeds, plus insecticide, fungicide, and herbicides are as good as bagged and secured. You see that? My goodness, Superior exclaimed. How did you manage such a feat? I'm about to sign a 4-year contract to supply all the government institutions in Nasila with agricultural input, Kaelo said confidently. Once he had spoken those words, Ole Kaelo felt guilty. Ever since he began negotiating for the supply of the inputs, he had told no one of the deal. It was a secret that he kept close to his heart. It had already cost him a fortune, but if the deal went through, he thought oppressively it would make all the difference. He now felt rueful. It was as though by speaking about it, he had broken the spell that would have brought the good fortune. He grew anxious, leaned back on his seat, crossed his legs, trying to firmly suppress his own distaste for corruption that was entrenched in those contract-giving offices. He had long realized that the choice was between remaining a nobody self-righteously and accepting sensibly that the man with the meat was also the man with the knife. Whoever wanted to eat meat must of necessity dance to the music of the man who held the two. My brother Ole Kaelo, Superior said amidst malicious laughter that had a touch of friendly mockery. Tell me, who have you been corrupting? Nobody really, Ole Kaelo answered angrily, his teeth set on edge. I only made contact with, he stated, then gaining his composure continued. I made contact with a man called Oloisidori. I met the man in Nakuru. Do you know Oloisidori? Interrupted Superior sharply. Do you really know what you have gotten yourself into? Taba. He leaned forward, elbow on the table, his eyes growing into sudden sharp needle point of interest. He remained so for a moment, then sank back into his chair, smiling mirthlessly. My dear brother, here in Nasila, everybody knows anyone who is corrupt, and Oloisidori is probably the most corrupt of them all. What a head start. I'll be glad to share some of those contracts should you run out of supplies. They are quite a bite, I dare say. The mockery did not escape Ole Kaelo, but to hear the man he had all along considered to be his mentor pour cold water on what he regarded as his grand entry into big business was not only frightening but disconcerting. He wondered whether his friend was not being hypocritical. He could be one of those selfish people who, after crossing a river, would destroy the bridge so that others did not use it. He lifted his eyes to look at his friend and shifted in his seat uneasily. In your opinion, he said and hesitated, quite embarrassed. Then he continued, do you think Oloisidori will deliver what he promised? Superior shrugged his shoulders. My brother, you are not naive, nor are you new in business, he said candidly. Oloisidori is in business and wants to continue being in business. If you have fulfilled your part, he will do his, especially if it suits him. So, he is a man of integrity, asked Ole Kaelo, a flicker of hope rising in his heart. A man of integrity indeed, Superior said, scornful smile twisting his lips. Don't trust him any further than you would a hyena in your homestead. Then lowering his voice as if he was letting him into a guarded secret, he whispered mischievously, and my friend, keep the fella away from your daughters. He has a reputation that would rival that of a randy he-goat. With that advice, Ole Kaelo left his friend. Though feeling discomfited, he was nonetheless the wiser, or so he thought. In the afternoon, the Kaelo family left Simiren's homestead to be driven the 1 kilometer distance to their new home. They rode almost in silence, each wrapped in thought they did not care to share with others. Mama Milanoi, dazzled by dreams of eventful fulfillment, failed to notice that her husband's silence was ominous. She even forgot the premonition that had earlier gnawed her conscience. Tayo had not recovered fully from the traumatic experience they had gone through. The threatening hostility the evil young man displayed had not dissipated, and that the sense of foreboding from the threat was still hanging in the air like the sword of Damocles. Her arms, which the man had roughed up, still felt unclean. She could still feel the touch of his heavy, callous hands. She drew in a deep, trembling breath and released it in a sigh as she silently sat at the back of the pickup with her sister. Resian also sat there silently. At last they were home, and before them was the solid stone-built, red-tiled roofed house that was going to be their home. It was built on a hill that allowed a command of breathtakingly beautiful scene. While his wife and daughters jumped out of the pickup excitedly and scrambled to the gate of their new house jubilantly, Pasimei Olekailo remained behind for a few minutes. Ole Supeyo's words still nettled him. Truly, he had known Ole Sidori to be a notorious criminal, but was not everybody doing business with him? Was he really that bad, he wondered, or was it the usual business rivalry and envy? Try as he did to justify his business deal with Ole Sidori, something inside him told him it was not right. He thought an old man of Ole Supeyo's seniority did not use the word taba lightly. That's the end of our second chapter. I'm glad you've been with me, hoping you've subscribed. In our next video, we are going to read chapter 3. Follow the reader and always welcome.